Hello everyone and welcome to the TechVB podcast. We talk tech, accessibility and life. So get comfy and enjoy the podcast. Hello peeps and welcome to TechVB podcast. Episode 9 this time with you. Thanks for joining. This is an exciting episode, I can tell you that for sure. So, we're talking today with Jean Marc. He's R&D, research and development person in WeWalk. And we had amazing conversation about WeWalk itself, what it is, or what problems it's trying to solve, and how it does that. So, WeWalk is a smart cane, which contains a smart cane itself, and the app, and we will talk about it in the episode. We had great conversation in general about accessibility, how we're supposed to look at it, and how we're supposed to ask the right questions and stuff like that. So it was really good conversation, insightful I have to say, because Jean Marc have experience in this and he's a geek as me. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I asked him some tricky questions and he answered them, and it was quite fun. So let's go to the episode, shall we? Hello Jean Marc, and welcome to TechVB podcast. Thanks for coming in. So how are you doing today?
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on here, V. Great to meet you and great to be on TechVB. I'm great, just excited to talk about tech accessibility. I mean, this is the perfect podcast for something like WeWalk. So let's dive right into it.
Yeah, as we say on TechVB, on the intro, I always said, we talk tech, accessibility, and life, because accessibility is all about, those things, I suppose, life and tech and stuff like that.
Exactly.
According to my notes, you're the head researcher on WeWalk and stuff like that. But before that, I just want to hear about you, who you are as a person, what you do, a bit of the bio, I suppose,
Okay. I'll try my best to keep it to a bit of a bio, not the whole bio.
But feel free.
Okay. So here we go. I'm Jean Marc. I am WeWalk's head of research and development. So I look after our user requirements, making sure that the tech we make is actually fit for purpose. And a bit about me. So I'm visually impaired myself. I have something called Leber's congenital amaurosis. So very similar to RP. It's a retinal disease which I've had since birth. But it's something which I've learned to love and something which I've learned to use to hopefully better our entire community. So I grew up in Abu Dhabi, learned a lot about, accessibility there. And then when I moved to the UK, maybe 7 years ago now, crazy to think how time has flown past, I began to appreciate how sometimes the smallest details like tactile paving, high contrast signage, even simple things like built-in screen readers on our mobile devices can have a huge impact on someone's ability to access basic life services, things like transport, seeing friends and family, even sometimes just grabbing a coffee.
Indeed, yeah.
And so after pursuing civil engineering, which perhaps is not a very accessible field for people with visual impairments, I decided to conduct a master's project as part of my master's in the accessibility of the London Underground. And again, at the time, my interest in accessibility peaked hugely. I mean, looking at the small details and nuances in accessible transport was fascinating. And it inspired me to start my PhD in visually impaired mobility over 3 years ago now. Specifically looking at what are the requirements of visually impaired mobility. So what are the psychological and physiological processes occurring when a visually impaired person with different visual functions decides to move. And it's then, at that time, at the beginning of my PhD, where coincidentally, I met with WeWalk co-founder Gökhan, but actually here in the UK, it was really a chance encounter. And we realized, wow, this project is an extraordinary project. I'd love to be part of this. And the rest is history. Since then, we've been building WeWalk with the rest of the wider WeWalk team, which is an incredible team to be part of. And that's where we are today. It really has been an incredible journey.
That sounds amazing. I like the part. I mean, I like two parts. One, that you joined WeWalk, and another one that you actually decided to research the area of accessibility, because
Indeed.
I did the research myself. Well, I didn't do masters, but what I did is I have like what do you call? Anyways, higher end, like 4 years degree basically in information management. And what I did is I tried to do some research on how accessible is higher education for blind and visual individuals, And I did actually focused on Ireland mostly, but during that research, I looked it up anyway, like, how is things in the world in general and, whatnot. And yeah, there was some scary data in there, that for example, I believe that, what I say to people, that accessibility is part of its education. People want to help you out and stuff, but they just don't know how, So, yeah, I kind of like that you started to do that research,
I appreciate it. I mean, here's the thing. It's like having, anything, be it a visual impairment, a cognitive impairment, it's quite unique. It's a unique trait that only you can fully understand. And so you have the power to educate other people, right? So your understanding of your visual impairment can make significant benefits, if applied through technology, through education, through whatever medium you find to be the most appropriate to your skill set. That you can use your unique experience to build technology. That's what we always said WeWalk. So we build the technology based on our lived experience. And that's what helps us as an organization deliver a product which, we believe actually works. It's because of that unique experience you get from being visually impaired. And so I urge anyone else that's visually impaired or with any other sort of impairment, you have a unique insight that no one else knows.
True. And it's like, the thing with insights, in my opinion, is that you can't learn unless you live. That's just the best experience you can get. And, it's interesting that you're using your products yourselves, because I was listening to a podcast, I think it was Techie or something.
Yep.
And you said that you're using the cane yourself, but we will talk about this a bit more. So how did you meet with the founder of WeWalk? I'm just wondering what the story was.
This is a funny story, and I'm glad that we're finally getting it on recording, because so many people ask me, but we never have like a proper outlet to describe it. But so 3 years ago, a young Jean Marc, having just started my research in visually impaired mobility, my team and I in Imperial College, my research team, were looking at a hackathon, a Transport for London hackathon for accessibility. And at the time, I thought, imagine if someone had made something that fits onto the standard white cane that could help visually impaired people mobilize. And back then, WeWalk wasn't what it is today. It wasn't like we had our own website or anything like that. It really was the early days, right? The really early days. And so I was online and I found, there's a WeWalk that's registered at WeWork. And at the time I thought, WeWork obviously must own WeWalk, right? I mean, very similar names, and it's based here in the UK. Incredible. Can I perhaps get, an early prototype or some sort of product for the next day, for the hackathon the next day? And so I started calling up WeWork, and I was, obviously very excited, like, hi, I'm Jean Marc, I do all this accessibility stuff. Do you know where I can get a WeWalk from? And the poor woman on the phone had no idea what I was talking about. She was probably like, do you want to buy office space? Like, what's wrong with this guy? And after like 15 minutes of both of us being very confused, she said, okay, well, give me a few minutes and let me see if I can find out who you're talking about. And a few minutes go by, and I suddenly get an email from Gyokan, who I didn't know at the time, of course, saying, hi, we heard that you're interested in what WeWalk is doing. Let's connect. And I don't think I've ever gotten onto a train as quickly as I did that day, because I was like, yes, let's meet right now. We met up at her office in Bank that fateful day over 3 years ago. And since then, it's history. I ended up stealing the first ever WeWalk prototype, if that makes sense. Like, this wasn't there. Again, there weren't like hundreds of WeWalks who weren't on sale. This was like the only unit. So I was like, thank you for trusting me with it. So I took it. We went to the hackathon the next day, and my team and I actually won that hackathon based on developing an accessible system for wayfinding inside train stations by sort of changing the system and changing the route chosen based on the user's own visual function. So how much the user can see, whether they prefer longer routes, and of course, proposing that such a system can integrate with WeWalk. And here we are, 3 years later, actually in a joint project with Imperial College London and the WeWalk team and the Royal National Institute for Blind People, actually building an indoor navigation system funded by Innovate UK, our government funding agency here in the UK. To build an indoor navigation system on top of WeWalk. So it's crazy how it went full circle so many years later, and we've come to this. So
that is indeed an interesting story. Yeah. I mean, the basis of this is enthusiasm and want to help, actually. That's what I realized just now. When you said, I just want to go to the train, I want to demo it now, it's just...
exactly, yeah.
I like that passion, for change, I think it's great because I haven't found anything yet, but, I do understand where it comes from, myself, because, innovation and experience like yours is really helpful in this regard. So we know the story now, which is beautiful in a way. And I was reading that you got you got the award from Amazon. Am I right now?
Yes, we did. We got the Amazon Best Startup of the Year. So we were first selected from thousands of startups by Amazon. We were then shortlisted, and then it went to public voting, and we ended up coming on top. I mean, it was, again, pretty incredible being recognized by someone like Amazon. And I think it's a testament. I know you mentioned this just now about sort of my personal enthusiasm, but I don't think it's just my personal enthusiasm. It's the whole team's. Yeah, we are all unbelievably like-minded, I have to say. And that's one of the unique things about the WeWalk team. It's at every, if you think I'm enthusiastic, you wait till you meet those guys. Like, we're all very much so just excited to see people using our technology and using the things that we've created to make people's lives better. It could not be truer for our team.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, when you solve problems with passion, it's just another thing, I think that's how it works, Like, you can create business just for money or whatever, or you can create organization or whatever for actually, problem solving for real, for true purpose. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's one of those things, I think. All right, then. Let's move to the tech, shall we?
Sure.
So tell me, what is WeWalk, Kane? What kind of sensors it have, for example? So just for someone who does not know what it is, right? I want you to explain what it is and what it does and what kind of sensors it has. So just geek it out a bit, I suppose.
Geek it out. Okay, here we go. So WeWalk actually is two devices. So it's your smart cane, the WeWalk hardware, but we also have the WeWalk software, which connects to the WeWalk hardware. And both can be used standalone, and both have their own features. And when you mix them and match them together, then you get the ultimate WeWalk experience. So if we look at the smart cane, really, really simple, actually. It's an exercise in simplicity. We've taken the standard long white cane, which we love, and we always say at WeWalk, the cane is an amazing device. It's a symbol of our independence. We love the cane. But we want to add a couple of features to make it better, not to replace its existing features. Like, when people use WeWalk, we tell them, use this cane as you would use a normal cane, but now you have a bunch of extra features. So we've taken the long white cane, we've chopped off the rubber handle at the very top of the cane, and we've replaced it with the WeWalk handle, and that's got all the tech bits inside. So the entire shaft keeps operating like a normal cane, except now you've got the WeWalk handle to give you a bunch of features. The first feature is obstacle detection. So that's an ultrasonic sensor mounted to a haptic vibration motor built into the cane. And that fires out ultrasonic signals, actually at an angle of 55 degrees. And you can set the distance. You can set the distance up to about 1.8 meters. So you can select when WeWalk warns you of obstacles based on whether you're indoors or outdoors. It's a really cool feature. But what's even cooler is that WeWalk connects to the WeWalk smartphone application to allow you hands-free control. So the cane itself has a built-in touchpad, speaker, microphone, gyroscope, accelerometer, and compass. And we're using that compass to enhance outdoor navigation, and we'll be using the accelerometer and gyroscope to enhance our indoor positioning, as well as our mobility tracking feature, which is going to be releasing later this year, early next year. So we have a good sensor bed, essentially, to be delivering some really cool features. And the idea is that right now, with your WeWalk, you can put your smartphone in your pocket, keep one hand free, and you can access navigation, exploration, public transport, even our voice assistant, straight from your cane while leaving your smartphone in your pocket. And your navigation is also improved because we're using WeWalk's built-in compass. You're always pointing forward, basically. You don't have to worry about holding your phone in a specific angle to get your directions. And now we move on to the WeWalk smartphone application. So yes, the application's navigation, exploration, and public transport, they can actually be used standalone. So you don't have to buy a WeWalk smart cane to be able to access the navigation features. We've got like a much cheaper subscription option on our application. This was by, big requests. Previously, users bought the cane to use our app, but now we're like, no, you can use our app standalone. If you're not a long cane user, say you're a guide dog user, or say you don't even use a cane, but you just want a really accessible navigation application, then the WeWalk smartphone app is available. And it's probably, and I love this app because I do use it every day. I used it just this morning, which is our navigation and exploration. It's got low vision mapping, so our app can completely be changed in terms of color and text size. So even if you have some residual sight like myself, you can still benefit from the app's low vision interfaces outdoors, which is really useful. We have public transport, so WeWalk will take you, and I believe this is the first ever multimodal navigation system for visually impaired people, where WeWalk will take you to the bus stop, the train stop, even the river stop sometimes on the pier. It'll tell you what vehicle to get on, so it tracks the transport vehicles. And once you're on the vehicle, it'll automatically switch, and it'll tell you one stop to get off at. So it'll vibrate to warn you that you're getting close to your stop. Okay, now you have to get off at this stop. And then it'll automatically switch to walking navigation to complete the last mile of your journey. So it's a complete handheld, public transport and
guiding
walking
system, yeah.
Exactly. And on top of all of that, we've even got the exploration mode. So WeWalk will tell you about nearby restaurants, cafes, libraries, automatically, if you wanted to. There's like an automatic mode, or even manually. So you can scroll through some places, save them to your favorites. You can even call the places or travel there via Uber. The WeWalk app integrates with Uber, so you can switch apps easily. You don't have to worry about searching on Uber's interface. You can use our accessible interface and then jump over if you want to. And we have a My Places feature, so WeWalk will tell you where you are right now, so you can easily share your location with friends or whoever you'd want to. And you can save your favorite locations like home or your workplace. And this is just the features we have right now. So this is all available right now. We've got so many exciting features also coming up this year, next year. So we have committed to really building this platform and are always adding new features free of charge to our application for our users.
Interesting. So Cane is a device, a mobile app is a device on its own, and they both talk to each other, basically.
Exactly. If you want to, yeah. So if you want the ultimate experience, Cane user, connect them together, you can get hands-free control of the app. Or if you don't want that, you just want to use your app, it's also available. You just want to use your cane, you don't want to connect your smartphone, you've still got the obstacle detection, so you've got the best of both worlds.
So, right, so the cane has the gyroscope or all those sensors, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming it connects via Bluetooth, obviously. Yeah. So what's the battery life on the cane? I'm assuming you have to charge that one.
Yeah, you do, but it's actually pretty damn good, I have to say. So it depends on your usage, of course, as everything does. It depends if you're a constant long cane user, if you're using obstacle detection, so it can be very variable. But the minimum battery life, and I'd say if you're using it full power, everything turned on, full navigation all the time, then it's about 6 hours of continuous hardcore use, which is obviously really long. So that's assuming you're walking 6 hours a day. Yeah. But if you're occasionally using obstacle detection, you're not always using navigation because you're traveling around your house, or maybe, occasionally you want to go out, navigate to a new place, use obstacle detection, then it can easily last, more than a few days to a week, sometimes even weeks. Sometimes I've been 2-3 weeks. I'm like, all right, let me maybe use the cane today once. So because I have low vision at night, but in daytime, I'm a single cane user. So it's a very customizable device based on your preferences. But yeah, like I said, worst case scenario battery life, you're still good to go for a couple of days at least.
Now, you mentioned that am I wrong now? You said that your cane has the microphone and the speaker.
Yes.
So what does the cane actually tell you on the speaker? I'm just wondering, because I never used the cane that before, but I'm just curious from the usability perspective. Why would you need a speaker and why would you need a microphone? So how you interact with those?
So it's more a convenience feature. So say you're, going down a quiet street and you just want turn-by-turn directions. You've got your phone in your pocket, so the volume's not going to be that loud. WeWalk will stream the audio from the WeWalk app, like at 12, keep heading 12 o'clock and then turn left 3 o'clock on King Street, for instance. That information can be output via the WeWalk speaker, so you can hear it a little bit better. We also have something called the voice menu in WeWalk. So if you want to change obstacle detection settings, explore a new place, check out places around you, or even navigate to a safe place, you just double tap the touchpad. You can then scroll through a bunch of saved locations, or navigate to a new place. And WeWalk will tell you, okay, you're now in exploration mode, you're now in navigation mode. Then you double tap, then you enter, and it'll tell you about what places you're around. So it's like a convenience feature, so you don't have to plug in a headset. However, you can also plug in a headset if you want to. So if you want to connect a Bluetooth headset to your smartphone, like AirPods or bone conducting headphones, or even a classic, if your phone has a headphone jack, you can still plug that in. And all the audio coming from the WeWalk app will actually go to your wired headset. So completely flexible. You don't have to use the WeWalk speaker if you don't want to. And the microphone is for our voice assistant. So if you double tap and hold WeWalk's touchpad, you can actually talk to it. You can tell it, navigate me to Starbucks, turn on obstacle detection, disconnect WeWalk if you want to disconnect WeWalk. So where am I, for instance? It's a very popular voice command. You just ask WeWalk, where am I?
I want this cane now, actually. You just pitched me the cane. I want this cane.
It is cool. So yeah, it's very versatile in that sense. And if you don't want to use the speaker and the microphone, you just want a classic, touch gestures, you can totally do that. You can turn them off. You can mute WeWalk if you want to mute WeWalk. It's very flexible.
Yeah, I'm assuming you can say what's the battery life on my cane.
Yeah, all the cane functions.
That's lovely. Voice assistant. Yeah, I suppose what you're solving here is the hands. You don't want people to do stuff while they're walking. They just want to. It's just easy interaction with the voice.
Exactly. So you've got your cane in one hand. You've got your smartphone. You're navigating voiceover. You're trying to listen to what voiceover is saying. Well, you're also trying to navigate your cane. It's not a great experience, especially since now currently, before the WeWalk app, at least my personal use case, because I'm an Android guy. Crazy to hear, visually impaired guy on Androids. Anyway, because, iOS tends to get all their cooler apps. But, we've made WeWalk Android and iOS for that issue. And beforehand, I used to jump between so many different apps. I used to be on your Google Maps, jumping on Lazarillo, which is really cool, by the way. That's a cool app. But you just have to do so many, you have to jump through so many hoops to be able to access bus transportation. But with WeWalk, the ethos was, let's just bring it all together. So even if you're not using a smart cane, at least you've got your public transport, navigation, all that good stuff under one single application. So even then you can get to it quickly. And then if you want it to go even faster, put your smartphone in your pocket, use the WeWalk touchpad. You're no longer jumping apps, holding the smartphone in your hand. You've got everything sorted. It's a simple design decision, but one that's had some pretty big impact.
Yeah, I mean, the people say that, voice, kind of voice interface is the future, because we want, it's much easier to talk than actually do something. Because, when you talk, actually, you can do 5 actions in one go, like order me a pizza, the last one I ordered. So, if you want to do that via touchpad, let's say, via smartphone, you have to go and see what you ordered last. It's much, I think it's a great idea to have that voice control, really. And so, so obstacle detection, I'm interested in that one. So many people would say, I suppose, can we detect the obstacles above your head, or what's the properties of that feature like? So what can it detect, and what are the distances, and so on?
So obstacle detection for us is really simple. So we did experiment, and we keep experimenting with different ways of doing this obstacle detection. So should we vibrate more intensely as the obstacle gets closer, like a parking sensor? Can we use noises or beeps and stuff like that? But what we found with our system is we use the KISS system, so keep it simple, right? Which is once the obstacle is detected, it vibrates. It vibrates the whole cane aggressively, so you know that there's an obstacle. And we use the directionality of the cane to tell you where the obstacle is. So I know of a couple of solutions where they try to tell you whether the obstacle is to your left or to your right as you're swiping your cane. But we just realized, well, you're swiping your cane left and right anyway. So if you swipe your cane left and it vibrates when it's on the left, then clearly you've got an obstacle on your left, right? You don't need to get, feedback from what's on your right, because your next right swipe, if you're using basic cane technique, is going to be on your right. So we're mimicking the natural cane usage just above your chest level. So just like you would swipe your cane left and right to tell if there's an obstacle on the bottom left or the bottom right, the obstacle detection will also vibrate just like your cane would vibrate on tactile surfaces to let you know that there's an obstacle to your top left or to your top right or right in front of you if it vibrates as you're in your center sweep. So you don't have to change the way you use your technique on your cane. You just left, right, left, right. Oh, there's an obstacle that vibrated on my left. Therefore, I know there's an obstacle there. In terms of the distance setting, it only changes when WeWalk vibrates, not the intensity, because WeWalk will always vibrate, at a fixed intensity to make things easier. So you can differentiate it between ground field. And that distance can be set. So you can go super low at about 65 centimeters, or you can go pretty high at like 1.8 meters. So WeWalk will tell you about things that are quite far away. And that's for indoor versus outdoor settings, congested versus non-congested. Everyone has their personal preferences, I've found. But, when you're outdoors, we recommend using a bigger setting. If you're indoors or in a really congested area, we just recommend turning it off or using the lowest setting. And that versatility means that you don't keep getting bombarded with vibrations. Like, we will only tell you if there's something right in front of you or above you. And yeah, the range of detection, it's about 55 degrees. It's like a sphere, if you think about it, starting from your waist, which is where WeWalk is being held up, all the way past the top of your head.
That's cool.
So it's cool.
Protects you. They're gonna tell you things. You're not gonna. That's. I mean, 1.2 meters, let's say, or 1.8. It's enough, I would say. Like, it's it's because you're using your cane as well. It's extended, so I mean, it's enough of the distance to alert you in time, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're like running really quickly. In most cases. Yeah, in most cases, that's the thing. So your obstacle detection really only needs to be as far as the tip of your cane. And that's a thing which, it's like you don't need long obstacle detection because when you're using a wide cane, fundamentally at ground level, the most coverage you get is only as far as your cane, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if I can tell you that there's an obstacle 4 or 5 meters away. Your ground level detection is still just as critical, like telling if there's a curb or a crossing or shorelining. And so your world really only goes towards the end of your cane.
Yeah, I get your point. Yeah, it's. I'm sure you experimented with it a lot, and I mean,
we did.
That makes sense. So, knowing that, I wonder, if you have to explain to the user or to someone who is listening right now, what are the key problems that WeWalk is trying to solve?
So this is a good question. I guess the first key problem is we're trying to solve almost all the issues created by inaccessible solutions and even the smartphone. So we love the smartphone, right? It's an incredible device. I can't live without my smartphone. And I'm guessing no one can exactly. And whilst it's a great device that's allowed many sighted people to access public transport, navigation, and all that, we have to be careful when implementing these new solutions that we create a solution that's accessible, that doesn't leave the visually impaired community behind. So just from the smartphone perspective, we've created a new problem which many orientation and mobility trainers might not realize, which is, yes, we've always taught visually impaired people how to use the standard white cane. We love you guys. O&M trainers are our favorites. We always work with them. But now we've introduced this new issue of trying to navigate a smartphone, and not being distracted by that smartphone when conducting your day-to-day O&M, right? So crossing roads, detecting dropped curbs, tactile pavings, and all that. And so the first problem is we want to make sure that if a visually impaired person is using a smartphone navigation application, they're using one which is accessible, which doesn't distract them from their core O&M, which is so important. Like, without your O&M, like, WeWalk won't help you. Nothing can help you. You got to have that basic O&M confidence to be able to navigate outdoors. And so we've tried to fix that problem brought about by smartphone and navigation applications, where if you're over reliant on your smartphone, which can be very easy, I was at a time very reliant on my smartphone. Didn't used to worry about memorizing streets, knowing if I'm heading south, east, or west. It was all like, I will rely on my smartphone. And then you realize if the application you're using is inaccessible, or the designers change something that make it inaccessible, then you're kind of stuck, right? Like, you suddenly don't know how to navigate. And so with WeWalk, by bringing together all those individual features, we've already tried to solve the first issue of segregated navigation applications, bringing together your public transport navigation, your exploration mode, your walking navigation, and also the microscopic problems of existing navigation applications. So we give users clock directions, and they can change and customize whether they want clock directions. We have low vision interfaces. Not many people realize that not all blind people are blind. Actually, the minority of the blind community are blind. A lot of people still have some usable vision. So using that usable vision, instead of just making an app which is inaccessible for the visually impaired community as a whole, but then we've taken it one step further and went, well, okay, what's another issue with smartphones apart from the applications on the smartphone? Well, the smartphone itself. Now you've got an extra thing you have to carry when navigating around with your white stick. If you want to carry your shopping, you can't do that. If you want to carry your coffee, you can't do that. And what if you bump into something? And so what we've done now is we've said, okay, now we've solved this problem. You keep your smartphone in your pocket, and you've got everything in one place. You've got your ultrasonic sensor for obstacle detection. Again, another key problem that people are very familiar with. Upper ground obstacle detection is a big failure point of the cane itself. Nothing, unfortunately, can really protect you from that. But with WeWalk, we've tried to fix that. But then we've also fixed that issue of, okay, keep your smartphone in your pocket and navigate the entire experience with a touch. But then again, and on top of this, WeWalk really isn't a static platform. And I stress that WeWalk is not a perfect device. I know, crazy to say that, but we realize that as a company, there's no such thing as a perfect accessibility device, right?
Look, honesty is the best policy.
Exactly. And that's the thing with WeWalk. So we've learned a lot. I mean, WeWalk 1 year and a half ago, isn't the product it is today. We've learned a lot of things. Back in a few days, WeWalk was a problem in certain cases. So for instance, we were once shipping with a different cane before we partnered up with Ambitech. People said, hey, we don't like this cane as much. So we said, okay, let's stop developing our own cane. Let's just attach WeWalk to an Ambitech shaft, right? And we replaced all those canes and we made it better. So we're constantly learning about new problems as we go along. And we've got a dedicated user team, in the UK, in Turkey, in the US, and we're always expanding. Where we give users this trial period. We're like, okay, 30 days, take your cane if you want to. There's always a 30-day return policy for us. We're going to give you free unlimited training. So we're going to get on the phone with you. We're going to teach you as much as you want about WeWalk. Just book in a session with us. We've got a dedicated team. And you're going to tell us what goes right and what goes wrong. A lot of times it goes right. But yeah, on certain occasions, people go, well, actually, maybe the navigation system can be improved. Maybe your obstacle detection settings can be improved. Your voice menu settings can be improved. We then go back, and because our developers are all in-house, we can then go back and make those changes and feedback to the users. And that's I think that realization that your technology isn't perfect, and that you have to realize that your technology is only as good as your actual users, right? Like if they don't tell you what's wrong with it, you're never going to find out what's wrong with it. And we're always learning. So we always find new problems that we can solve, and we try to do it together.
Yeah, I suppose what you're saying, what I'm getting from your side is that you're a customer-driven company where customers are actually telling you things, and you are actually, you're using their feedback a lot, to improve the design and to improve the experience and stuff. I think it's important.
Yeah, no, 100%, completely. We love our customers. I hope any other organization would also say that, but at least we openly say that. Thanks, guys. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was listening I was listening Jeff Bezos talking about his business and how they grow. That's a bit off topic, but anyway, he said we are customer focused and customer driven company. Because I mean, not many people, I suppose, many companies realize that customers are people who test your product for free. And some companies, not every company have, embraced that properly. You know what I mean? Because I suppose many companies would think, Jesus, he does not know much. What can he tell us, and stuff like that, So I think it's kind of cool to do that. So you're saying you're providing a 30-day customer kind of care where you can book a schedule appointment and you can ask away, right? That's what you're saying.
Our customer care lasts more than that, so
I know, but
team will always be there for you. You've got your 1-year warranty, but I mean, it's like that 30 days of just, if you don't like it, if it doesn't work for you, then we'll stand by. Just return it to us. So yeah, that's something which we have, but the customer care will last forever. I mean, if you ever need anything from us, we would schedule it in with you and we'd work with it. Like I said, we're a relatively small organization, right? So we kind of all know each other in the company. The user team works with the R&D team. So I meet with our user team a lot. And so we all kind of know, okay, this user had this issue. How do we then fix it and improve it? And I really like what you said there, V, which is customers test it for free. Well, even one step further, they don't just test it for free, they pay you. So the least you could do as a sign of respect for your customer is actually deliver a product which works for them, right?
Yeah, I just meant to say that if you're using a free product, let's say,
Exactly, yeah.
It's just one of those things that not many companies are embracing enough. So, all right. So, what are the challenges that you can tell us about? Like, so what challenges are you experienced before, or what you are experiencing right now while developing the app and developing the cane? So, what can you tell us about that?
That's a very, very good question.
Because I'm sure you have to meet with people. You have to ask them how. So I want to find the process behind finding out what works and what doesn't, and just that background a bit. So that would be interesting, I suppose.
The challenges. Wow. Okay, this is a big question, right? So I feel like we're gonna need a whole other podcast for this because it's tough, right? Like you're building a smart cane, and this is very uncharted territories. Like that's the whole point of innovation, right?
True.
You're making something big.
Research
and there are going to be challenges. No one said, "Oh, this is easy." We're going to show up. We're going to make marketing because you got to combine hardware. You're combining your software, and again, you're working in a field where user requirements are diverse. It's not like visually impaired person. You have so many different, individual capabilities within every visually impaired person that everyone has their own unique set of requirements, and we recognize that at WeWalk. We don't come up and say, "Well, WeWalk is going to fix all visually impaired people's problems." It simply won't, right? Every individual will have a different preference. Some cane, like WeWalk, might completely change a visually impaired person's life. And we've seen customers like that. And on many occasions, some customers might say, well, actually, maybe the WeWalk Smart Cane isn't for me. So the first challenge is understanding those requirements. So how do we, before even the technical challenges of how do we procure the sensor, how do we procure a manufacturing partner, how do we develop this using agile methodologies, whatever, ignoring all the development aspects and the hardware and software procurement challenges that you have when running a tech company. Your first challenge is, have we properly and exhaustively identified the requirements of our individual users? Is our navigation system good enough? And if we had an ideal wish list, do we understand what the perfect navigation system for visually impaired people are? And I can say at WeWalk, we're doing that. We're slowly learning that. Is it perfect? No. But is it probably one of the most advanced systems that we've put our hearts and souls into? I would honestly say yes. So with our navigation system with multimodal, we've spent hours, and this was a big challenge for us, drafting and deciding, okay, what does the ideal navigation system look like? What does the public transport system look like? And then not only that, how do we get the right data providers to give us the right solution? So, we have a partnership, for instance, with MoveIt, amazing organization. They've got their own app as well. They do all the public transport. They're baked into our application. We're using Microsoft Azure services for our upcoming mobility tracking solution. We're using their services. So again, it's not just about designing the user requirements on your own, but then how do we integrate our external partners like Microsoft, like Amazon, like all the people we work with, to actually deliver the solution before we even begin development. So actually deciding on who's going to support and who's not going to support. And then after doing all of that, and that's a big process, then you go, okay, let's actually build this thing. And as you're building this thing, you have to keep iterating. So we built our navigation system. We've rolled it out through a software update. And then we realized, okay, this is better than what we had before. But now we can't just move on to the next feature. We have to dedicate a maintenance schedule for navigation to make sure that if data changes, to make sure the system is maintained, but also to make sure we're taking in feedback from our users. Because sometimes you might build something and think it's the best thing ever, but then you roll it out to your users, and as you said, they're the testers in the end. They're the end people that give you judgment. And they go, well, actually, it's so close to being perfect, or it's so close to being great, but we've got issue X, Y, and Z. Then you have to take it back to the drawing board and build it. And at the same time, while you're making all these software improvements, you got to work on your procuring your hardware, your shipping and distribution. And we're lucky to say that we're working with a Turkish manufacturer, the biggest manufacturer in Europe, Vestel. So they're doing all our QA shipping. So WeWalk itself, we're lucky to have them working with us because we have a distributor and a supplier we can trust that can make quick changes if so required. But it's then marrying all that together. So, okay, we've done all this stuff on the software. How do we then integrate with the hardware? Do we have to roll out firmware updates, which we do free of charge, by the way? So it's not just software updates that we provide, but we also provide WeWalk firmware updates to sort of improve stability, improve compass use, all the sensors and stuff like that. And then you have to maintain them and keep them going whilst also designing new features. So as I mentioned, we've got the indoor navigation coming up later next year. We've got our new mobility tracking solution also coming up next year. It's like a fitness tracker that can tell you about your steps, the distance you've traveled. It can even give you really cool cane techniques and cane metrics because we were using the sensors in the cane, like your
cane metric. That sounds nice.
Exactly, it's so cool, so cool. And then also feeding this data back to O&M trainers, like your orientation and mobility. So are our students walking more outdoors? Are they walking less outdoors? All that good stuff. So it's also building all those cutting edge features whilst also maintaining what's kept your product great, for so long. And then on top of all of this, and then we're just talking technical, then you've got the business side as well. So how do we work with distributors? How do we get O&Ms to test our product? How do we get the user engagement? And I cannot stress enough how important those organizations are. So our partners like the Royal National Institute for Blind People, the RNIB here in the UK, Vision Australia, CNIB in Canada, just too many to name in one sentence. Those guys are the gatekeepers. We've built the technology, but we need people that actually know technology, they can test the device, they have access to the local community, they can feed back the local community's feelings from our product. We then work with them, and procuring those guys isn't easy. It takes months of making contacts, calling people, getting all that together. But luckily, we've come to a point in the company where we just got all that stuff kind of working smoothly. So we've got the business teams, the designer teams, the tech teams all working together. And so I understand why not everyone decides to build an assistive tech company, because it's a challenge. But when you get the challenge right, and I mean this when I say it to you, when you get the challenges all sorted out, and you see people smiling faces when they're using your technology, and they tell you, look, that technology has now changed our life, every single member of our entire team just becomes the happiest person in the world, because all that tiredness, challenges and sweat and blood and all that gets translated into actually changing people's lives. That's the beauty of assistive tech. It's like big reward at the very end of it.
The motivation and
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it feels good when you do good, right? I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Even psychology, actually, research says that doing good actually makes you happier. That's just it's a proven thing. It's not like I'm making this up. It actually is true, and it's psychology, because I'm into psychology a bit myself, doing some research from time to time.
Oh, nice! Wow, nice.
And yeah, it is one of
you're doing everything, V. Like honestly, just from your website and all the stuff you do, you're like an icon for the visually impaired community, right? You got to keep this up. You got to keep this up.
Yeah, what I'm doing with TechVB really is basically this. I'm just putting what I know, and I'm getting slowly but surely the team that could contribute to my knowledge base, because as I said, see, the goal of TechVB is to provide practical knowledge, I'm not reviewing any products, not as much, but what I'm doing is providing very technical, well, sometimes technical, sometimes not, but practical, knowledge and stuff like that, in terms of accessibility and stuff like that, And yeah, your job sounds complex. I mean,
yeah, it's not easy.
I mean, business. Like I know what you're saying now. Because what I'm thinking right now is this: that you said that you have to take care of business aspect as well as the user's aspect, and sometimes it's very hard to align those things because obviously you need profits and stuff like that to grow, and it's tricky because you see, one thing. Regarding the accessibility industry is that there's lots of costs, Things like Braille displays cost lots of cash,
Yeah.
And I know it's because of the market, but your price seems to be reasonable. I'm thinking, it's not like you have to change your cane I wonder, the question popped up to my mind right now is, how easy it is to switch the cane, because we know that cane is not, it can be broken, but not. Like, can I just take it off that yoke and change it or is it how easy is to replace the cane and then just put that device on another cane?
No, you've just said it. So we realized the cane is a disposable device. Like, you break them all the time. I've been through so many canes. It's really easy. So WeWalk actually attaches to the standard shaft with a screw. So we've, again, removed the rubber handle. So you know how, like, most canes, well, we're talking about flexi canes. So canes that actually fold up, non-rigid canes, foldable canes. You've got your rubber that usually attaches the handle to the rest of the cane. We've just untied that rubber, removed the rubber handle. We then replaced it with a screw, like a small little screw, tied the knot around that screw. And then you take the WeWalk handle and you screw it into the screw. So the cane can still fold, still very replaceable. And if you want to change your cane, then you have two options. You can contact us and we can supply you with another Ambitech cane that we've prepared for you. But, if you don't want to go through that, then we actually give you a spare adapter in the box, like a spare screw. So we already give you a cane in the box, so that you're good to go with an adapter. But we even give you another adapter spare. So if you want to attach WeWalk to your own cane, you just follow the process, untie the section of the cane, remove that section, put the screw back in, and you replace it. So if you break your cane, you can easily then change the shaft of your cane, broken cane, for another shaft without having to replace your actual WeWalk handle. And even better, this doesn't change anything about the shaft. So say you want to change your rollerball tip to a pencil tip or a long-lasting tip or whatever tip you want to change it to. You don't even have to remove the WeWalk handle. You can just follow the same procedure as you would with standard folding canes, which is pull the tip out, unhook it, it's a hook-on tip, and replace the tip. So everything you can do with a regular cane, you can still do with your WeWalk.
So it's a smart attachment, per se.
Exactly. It's a smart attachment rather than changing the entire cane.
It sounds definitely very cool. I didn't know, like, I kind of thought, like, how difficult it would be. But now once you explain it, it actually makes sense. You just change the handle, basically.
Yeah, it's really simple. I mean, that's another, I guess that's another part of the challenges that you brought up, which is, if we had unlimited budgets, right, and every visually impaired person can afford the most insane technology, then yeah, maybe we design like some magic wand that will tell you what's on the ground and what's in front of you and all that. But in reality, that's not what assistive tech is meant to be. Assistive tech is meant to be a simple device that doesn't detract from the user's own capacity. So number one, the user has to use their own capabilities biologically to the maximum extent. And the technology is only meant to compensate for that. The technology is not meant to come in and change the way the person lives their life. There's a reason why the cane is such a popular device, even though now we have autonomous vehicles and all that. It's because it does what it does really, really well. So you have to build on top of that.
Yeah, I get your point.
Keeping it simple, really important.
Yeah, the cane is a simple, really, it seems a simple innovation, but actually it works, Sometimes simplicity is the key in many actually ways in the product design and what people say, and as Apple like to say that simplicity is the key and it works, So exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. One thing I know that I'm like in my experience, to be independent, that means to be moving freely where you want, whenever you want, and I think navigation is really, really big part of that. And what you're trying to solve, I think, is really important, because what I want from navigation is I want to go somewhere, let's say I never been before, so I want to trust myself. I want to trust the device enough so it gives me good results in the places I never visited before. That's what a true freedom is, I believe, Yeah. And knowing that, we know both, I suppose, that there are some limitations in terms of in terms of navigation. So I'm wondering, what do you think are the limitations right now? Because I will tell you mine, but you go first. Okay. If you can think of. So I would just want a short discussion. What are the current technical bottlenecks, I would say, in truly independent navigation? We're getting there for sure, but I have opinion that there is bits to go. So I want to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, no,
you don't have to use a WeWalk an example if you don't want to, but in general, because you're definitely doing a great job. I'm just changing the direction because WeWalk.
No, of course.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So
no, we can talk about WeWalk. It's again having an honest discussion as to what our product can and cannot do.
I like that.
Is really important. Right? I'm not going to come and tell you, WeWalk is going to give you the most accurate navigation, is going to pinpoint you to the centimeter out, because it just won't. You know, like you got to have your expectations as to what you can do and what the technology can do. And I agree with you. You know, navigation and mobility, that is the key. You know, we found that it's probably the biggest barrier to functional performance for a visually impaired person. So your ability to actually carry out things like employment and all that stuff. I agree. Without good navigation or good exploration features, you've got a barrier. And I'm gonna make it a bit philosophical here, which is to say that the biggest challenge to us as a visually impaired community isn't necessarily the technical capacity. Of course, it is a direct impact. I'm not gonna lie. So navigation, accuracy, accessibility is important. But before you even consider any of that, it's all cognitive. It's our own personal desire. So regardless if you're partially sighted or completely blind, before you can even navigate anywhere, you as a person must have the confidence to even want to navigate anywhere or to want to use assistive technology. You know, there has to be a product or a device that will give you the confidence to even want to consider employment or navigation. Because people don't just navigate to navigate.
Agreed.
They navigate to reach point B. You have to have the confidence to become employed. You have to have the confidence to meet friends and family and all that.
Agreed.
And then navigation allows you to do that. It's part of the puzzle. And so we realized, Go on, sorry, Via.
So what you're saying is you need to have a motivation to explore the world, you know? I agree with you right there. No wonder. Are you not, I was researching about you. Are you still doing maybe it's out-of-date information, but are you doing the philosophy doctorate
Yes. So
no wonder you brought this up. I just...
So it's not.
I dig that a bit. You still do philosophy. That's interesting.
So it's not. So it's a PhD in the sense that it's not a doctorate. Well, it's not in philosophy per se. It's much more scientific, but it's called a PhD, like, you know.
Yeah.
Doctorate in philosophy and all that. It's more technical, but we also get to talk about stuff like this, which is, you know, the bigger psychological, even the philosophical, if you like, aspects of it. And this is something which comes up in my research, which I'm proud to say also is applied to WeWalks. You know, all that those findings, that technical background, it goes into something like WeWalk. But I go back to the previous point, which is you have to give people that motivation, and it's not WeWalk's job to do that. WeWalk forms a part of the puzzle of going, okay, so now you have the motivation to go somewhere. Well, guess what? We've got a technology and a company that understands your feelings and wants to give you the tools for you to realize and fulfill your motivation. But WeWalk is in conjunction with your O&M trainer, your friends and family, your schooling, your education, as you'd mentioned earlier, V. So it's part of that bigger puzzle. And if we can play a good part of that puzzle, then we can begin to get people using things like assistive tech. You know, awareness of assistive technology is a big thing. The next part is the technical stuff. You know, you're right. If you have fundamentally inaccessible devices, like if you give a smartphone to a visually impaired person, with the most accurate navigation system in the whole wide world, but the navigation system is inaccessible. It doesn't have voice-over compatibility, and the visually impaired person cannot act on its instructions. Then what's the point? You haven't achieved anything. So then you have to build it on the user requirements. So how do we build a good navigation system? Is the interface right? Are we delivering the information to the visually impaired person in a way that they can understand? And then you've got all the technical problems. So are we using the right sensors? You know, in a city area where GPS accuracy is technically much lower, do we have sufficient positioning to give the visually impaired person, you know, enough information to move safely? So there's a crossing, there's a turn-by-turn point here. And again, at WeWalk, we try to solve them. You know, we can't, again, solve everything. So WeWalk Outdoors still uses your smartphone's GPS, but we've tried to make improvements. So we're using the WeWalk's built-in compass, as well as some navigation algorithms, to try to make the GPS a little bit more accurate. But in the end, it's not going to be accurate all the time. So it's how do we make the system understand that, okay, if the signal is bad, it'll tell the user the signal is bad. So it doesn't give the user bad information. And so we keep trying to make those technical improvements. But at the same time as doing all those technical challenges, we keep in touch with our community. We keep in touch with the O&M specialists, the occupational therapists, even the ophthalmologists and the optometrists, to understand how visual impairment is changing. So how does, you know, these technical aspects, how do they translate to a user with visual acuity or contrast sensitivity, or to a user that has just come out of training versus a veteran user? And it's keeping those two channels alive, so the technical challenges to navigation, as well as the wider, more philosophical, if you'd like, aspects to visually impaired navigation, running in parallel and feeding off each other, that allows you to actually overcome these challenges.
Yeah, I agree with all the points you actually said. My point actually was, what I meant to say from a technical point of view is that me and my friend actually tried to build a navigation app, and what we realized is, you can have the best algorithm, but if the accuracy is not great, you can't fix the problem entirely. And what we found out is that when the turns are fine, sharp turns, it's fine, but if they're rounded in any way, like, there are some problems with the navigation sometimes, and accuracy is a big problem, I think, in terms of the technology, because we have algorithms, and that's my opinion again. I think that we have algorithms to solve the navigation issue, but the problem is, in my opinion, is that it's just, we don't have a good enough accuracy yet. I mean, it's about 10 meters, 5 to 10, which is, it's okay, but if we have a meter accuracy, that would be even better, I think.
Yeah.
And you see, what I meant to ask you is because I think that, funny enough, that the self-driving cars, right, you mentioned, I think this kind of tech will benefit us because that car will have technology that is useful for blind or visually impaired individuals. Things like LiDAR, maybe, or more accurate GPS device. So I think, what do you think about that? How do you think that self-driving cars, the technology of self-driving cars could actually improve a blind or visually impaired individual's life? I mean, yes, when it's available, it will. But I have a suspicion that the tech inside, the research that goes into self-driving cars will actually help somehow. Because, for one, the cars need to have very, very good accuracy, and that maybe means that we need to have more satellites that gives you more accurate data, and stuff like that. So I think it will help in the future, maybe. I'm helpful. What do you think about that?
Fully, completely agree. I think technology always trickles down. Like, no one's ever invented, one source of technology that's only remained for that specific application. It's like cameras, cameras were invented to take photos, but cameras can also be used for indoor navigation or thermal detection. It's like, infrared or GNSS for GPS. Like, what is the application? It can be applied in military. It can be applied in accessibility. So whatever is developed through autonomous vehicles, which allows for mass manufacturing of things like radar, LiDAR, image recognition. Once those technologies become more mass market, and once someone else has funded the very expensive research and development to make that technology a reality, then of course the technology will then trickle down to products like WeWalk, where it's much more cost effective, much more affordable, and much more functional. So like the ultrasonic sensor, WeWalk didn't invent ultrasound, right? We're just using a technology in a novel application to help people. But there's been years of research and development into making an ultrasonic sensor work. And all that years of development has ended up in a sensor which is affordable, which has allowed us to make WeWalk so competitively priced in Arcane. And I have no doubt that all the sensors being used in autonomous vehicles right now, as well as the software behind it, the algorithms which fuse this data, because you can have sensors, but they'll become readily available, and licensable. And allow us to use them inside the cane. And it's how you use them, I feel, which can make the difference. And that goes back to your point about curved streets. So again, one of the ways we've tried to solve that at WeWalk is instead of just saying turn left, we'd say turn left 2 o'clock or turn left 1 o'clock to indicate the severity of the left turn you have to expect. And then when you combine that with your O&M, so if say you're shorelining and you're coming to the left turn, you will then use whatever curved side or the wall which is running along you to indicate when the turn actually ends up happening. So once it's like almost as human beings, we're like doing our own data fusion, right? So you're talking about LiDAR and radar and fusing all the data. Well, with WeWalk and its existing sensors, you're also doing that data fusion yourself. Your human algorithms of how am I turning left?
Yeah, you're combining sensors in one useful kind of product, obviously. Sensoring and stuff. Yeah, I agree. I mean, in terms of, I think I'm really optimistic about the future in terms of image recognition, because right now, AI is very good at image recognition. So I'm thinking, in 15 years, we will have some kind of artificial sight possible. Right now it's not really possible because the algorithms can't really describe you the scene properly. But I'm wondering, 10, 15 years from now, we probably will have an algorithm that can analyze things pretty good, because the image recognition right now is very good, and things like LiDAR, as you mentioned, if that becomes available, I wonder what kind of useful information would that give us. I think the optical detection would be way improved, wouldn't it? From the LiDAR sensor, I think. If you have it. Because iPhones have a LiDAR sensor that works about 5 meters away, I believe. And I'm really curious, what do you think? What kind of benefits would LiDAR bring? Because iPhones have it. It's really small. Yeah. So 5 years from now, I'm sure it's going to be in China everywhere. You can order it freely as a implementable module. Yeah. So what do you think would that bring us?
So we've already come so far with what we can do with standard cameras here before we even discuss LiDAR, that I'm actually really excited for what the future can bring. I mean, if you look at, amazing technologies like Seeing AI.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible what Seeing AI can do. There's no doubt. Like, I would totally recommend absolutely everyone going to download Seeing AI, because what it can do is incredible. And we're not even talking about LiDAR or specific hardware. We're talking about iPhones that are 2-3 years old, can still access and benefit from that technology. So even before discussing what LiDAR will be able to do, I'm pretty confident in the next few years, as people keep on refining image recognition, I think it's going to do some pretty amazing things. I mean, look at things like NaviLens. NaviLens, you just point up your phone, it'll detect the NaviLens sticker, which is a huge issue. Image recognition is great, but you have to first know where the object is. They've kind of solved that problem, and they haven't had to rely on expensive hardware. I think before we even get into the discussion of what hardware can we use, you got to go, well, how can we make the most of our existing technology? Because if we get into this dangerous habit of going, well, we've got a sensor that can do this, you've made the product more expensive, you've made it more inaccessible, you've increased development costs, shipping costs, time costs, sometimes even quality, because the quality of certain sensors might not be the same as your tried and tested iterated sensors. Obviously, once we get into the future, once people have tested LiDAR more, and already it's got distancing, simultaneous localization, and mapping implementations. Once that becomes more and more widespread in the future, I'm pretty confident we'll be able to deliver some extraordinary indoor navigation solutions and even outdoor navigation solutions that no longer have relied on GNSS so heavily, to the point where if the GPS signal is lost, the system becomes obsolete. I think that could be probably one of the biggest fixes that we might get with that level of positioning. Just as people are doing right now. So if you look at things like dead reckoning techniques, people are using the predictive direction of things like gyroscopes and accelerometers to predict the position of the object once it loses contact with the sort of global positioning system. Not GPS in that sense, but be it in an indoor space, for instance. Dead reckoning is a very common practice to use them. So with things like LiDAR and camera detection and algorithms getting better, I am almost certain that in the future we will improve that ability for the system to self-diagnose and to map the location that it's in without having to rely on your sort of global sensing. And that could be really cool.
Yeah, that's why I'm excited about the LiDAR, because I'm not sure exactly, I don't know all of the details how it works, but I know it gives the depth information, it gives the distance, and that indoors is just golden. I mean...
Oh, of course.
You can, I think, like, what I can imagine, I wonder, I think you can go and, map yourself a route from your office to outside, let's say, and then I suppose, all that kind of, there is so many possibilities, I think, with the LiDAR, that's why actually I mentioned that, that I think it will be very cool. But you're right, we already have plenty sensors that already give us very good and accurate information,
Well, let me ask you a question, Avi, actually.
Sure,
Think of it this way, right? So, say you're indoors, and this is, again, a perfect example of the dangers of just trying to put the best sensors and calling it a day. Say you're indoors, say you're a white cane user, and you're coming up to a set of stairs, and you're a cane user. Why do you need a sensor like LiDAR, which makes your device super expensive, which is providing you with overlapping information, which might not always work because in the end, sensors run out of battery, perhaps, become so reliant on it. Do you then need a sensor to tell you that there's a stair in front of you? Would you want the sensor to tell you that there's a staircase in front of you if you're a long cane user?
I don't think so.
Exactly.
Yeah, you are correct. But at the same time, LiDAR would be useful where you actually, benefit from it, like distancing and whatnot. I mean, I'm not sure, like even the distancing, when I think about it, right? I don't know, like it's very, now you asked a very interesting question. How useful it actually would be, because can it give you accurate turn-by-turn directions? Not sure yet, we never tried. Because you made a good point about the distancing. If you're a wide cane user, how much extra do you actually need? I suppose unless the LiDAR could solve the turn, like the guidance problem, that's the only issue we need to solve really nowadays. I think. I'm
not saying that it wouldn't solve it. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be useful.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking out loud. That's all. Like I never thought, because you are thinking very much from the business perspective, which I do understand. And
no, not even from the business.
And of course, you tested many things when you developed, so you have better questions than I do in this case, and that actually makes sense. It actually does make sense. Yeah.
Well, it's not even from the business perspective. It's more from a user requirements perspective. Like, are we actually giving the user something useful? So I can come up a year from now and say, guys, we've invented the best thing. We've invented a device that will tell you when there's a staircase indoors, which we might have done. I'm not saying we can't, and perhaps with something like LiDAR and a lot of image recognition, we can. But then the visually impaired community and all the orientation and mobility trainers will say, well, why did you do that? We've had a technology like a standard cane, which is perfect for telling the user when there are stairs. It's tried and tested. It never runs out of battery. So you could have focused your development efforts on building something which actually solves problems, but rather the obsession was, let's just put the best sensors in the cane. So I'm not thinking of it from a business perspective. It's more just to say that...
Yeah, it was a wrong reference, I suppose.
No, I don't mean like that. Like, no offense taken or anything. It's more just, it's a combination of things that make things realistic. And that's something which I stress. So whoever companies are listening to this podcast, for instance, it's not just about using cutting-edge technology and calling it a day. It's more an example of, okay, do we need this sensor for this application? Or do we feel that as the visually impaired person is right now, that's not a pain point? Maybe we should be focusing our development efforts more on the actual pain point. And that's just, it's a way of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I like the way you evaluate use case scenarios, Do we need something new? Because I suppose what you're saying is we do everything with what we have, and then we add something if we absolutely have to, because we can keep the costs down, let's say,
Yeah, so keep the users happy. Give them, you don't overload information. I mean, say you come up to a staircase and then suddenly your device is telling you there's a staircase. And you're like, but actually, that could be quite disabling. I think there was a study conducted, it was by Brostek Lee in the US and the University of Kentucky. I think they did the study, but they did some research where they found that too much obstacle detection, too much vibrations, causes a reduction in walking speed, because the visually impaired person is constantly being alerted to obstacles in front of them to the point where they just don't even navigate. So too much information can be a bad thing. So it's a delicate balance. It's a very delicate balance.
Yeah, you have to understand like the user, how it navigates, to actually give them directions in the right time and give them the feedback. I actually agree, because if there are like, I wonder, I never tried that feature, like how good your cane is dealing with, like if there is lots of people in front of you, because those are obstacles essentially. So I wonder how that, can you do something about it to minimize that, or is it not really possible, or is it going to be vibrating?
So we can do, but we can only do so much.
Yeah, I agree. So I know.
Yeah, so we can lower the obstacle detection frequency, which we recommend our users doing, so they can do that really easily on the touchpad. Double tap, swipe to obstacle detection. You then tap medium or low instead of high, and then your cane will stop vibrating so aggressively. So it'll only vibrate you for obstacles that are at your cane length and not farther away. So chances are, if you're in a crowded space, your cane is going to touch someone first before the obstacle detection vibrates. And that's a really useful feature.
Yes, actually, because what I thought right now is, since it's very easy to change that, you can actually just do it on the fly depending where you are, So
exactly.
Yeah, flexibility.
Now again, does it warn you about where the people are and stuff? It doesn't. But do you need that? That's the question.
No, I don't
really.
No, I don't think so. You're not going to be very benefit. If you know where, it won't benefit you that much, to be honest. It's
how does it help you knowing that there's and again, it's thinking about that. That really goes back to the discussion we had, which is maybe there is a sensor out there that can tell you where the people in front of you are, and that'll be cool from a tech perspective. That'll be so cool. I'd love to see that. But do you need it? Do you need it to actually help you achieve your goal? So, and this is a word which I think people need to use more often. So we talk about accessibility, right? But there's another word which is even more important than accessibility, which is usability. And usability means the ability of the user to carry out their motivation or intention in the specific environment. So an environment can be totally accessible. So a train station can be accessible, can have really good elevators and stairs or whatever. But if the user doesn't want to use that station, or it doesn't help them fulfill what they want, so say that station doesn't actually doesn't have the transport line that takes them to another station, then that station becomes unusable for the user, even though it's fully accessible. You can have like a technology like WeWalk that can give you really accessible information. So it can tell you, where the crowds are, the position of the stars if you really wanted to do. But if it doesn't help the user achieve what they want to achieve, which is get from point A to point B, then it's accessible but not very usable. And that usability perspective is a very important thing to look after.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Usability is a crucial component in terms of, right information at the right time. That's what it actually is.
Yeah, exactly.
As you said, you can get lots of information and in the right time, but some information probably is more useful than other, and that just doesn't, Yeah, I would agree. Now, I also read that you're advisor for transport, right?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, because it's a very big part of ours, right? Transport I'm not going to drive for a while now. So I'm wondering, what is your opinion in terms of accessible transport? What are the components? Because where I'm right now, Ireland, I'm not happy about it whatsoever. And I want to record your opinion on the podcast. What are the components to making sure it's accessible, and what are we missing? That's probably the crucial answer you should answer, probably in your experience. Maybe UK has better transport accessibility than Ireland does, but for example, where I'm right now, the bus does not pronounce the stops properly, That's where the navigation app comes into play, where it uses GPS navigation to replace that guy on a speaker on the bus. But things like beacons, for example, I'm really a fan of that technology, a beacon. It's just a Bluetooth device with some extra information, and yet there's not that many implementations of beacons, not that I know. So I wonder, what's your opinion on that kind of stuff? How we ensure accessibility? What can we do about it? And what's missing, basically?
Well, that's a multi-million-dollar question there, V. That's a big question to answer. Again, I'd love a whole podcast just for this topic.
Yeah, it's a too broad question, I suppose.
It's a huge topic. How do you build the most? I'll give you a teaser. I'll give you a philosophy to think about, which is, there's a dangerous way of thinking in transport, which is the most inaccessible system is a system that doesn't exist, right? Like if you think about how to make a system more accessible, where a lot of people say, well, look, having a really comprehensive and complex network is the best, because we're covering every location, we're accessible. Sure, some stations might not be step-free, some stations might not be accessible. We'll call today. And unfortunately, that's just the fact of life of the transport, because it's a huge industry. Yes, based on things like the Equality Act, on national standards, the system has to be made accessible. But in something as complex as a transport network, you're no longer looking at things like assistive technology or simple devices that operate in a bubble. You're looking at a whole system that has to be operated, governed. You have so many pain points. Not only do you have infrastructure pain points, like is the gate line accessible? Are the ticket machines accessible? Ticket machines have always been an accessibility issue for visually impaired people. Do they talk to you?
But those are probably going to be gone soon, because everything is in an app nowadays,
But as you said, it's everything. Does the bus driver recognize your impairment? Do they lower the bus when buses are lowerable to provide level boarding? Are there auditory announcements on the bus? Does the transport network have an API to give you access to their transport data, such as the arrival time of buses, which is hugely important? Are the buses signposted? Are the vehicles signposted? And then, of course, all of the infrastructure questions, which are thousands and thousands of questions that we can't really get into today. But then you also have to remember, what are the staff and other transport users' external feelings towards the visually impaired person? Do they respect social distancing? Do they provide a turn up and go service where the visually impaired person can hold on to another staff member and navigate? Is the literature and online availability of information accessible for the visually impaired user? So what you end up finding in transport is there's no such thing as a single facet, like, okay, transport system is there versus transport system not being there. It's so much more complex because every part of the journey, from initially planning the journey to embarking on the journey to interrogating the system to make sure that you're on the right path. So am I at the right station? Am I at the right journey? And then, of course, the last mile problem. So is the final walk from the station to the front door, for instance, is that accessible? Is the paving correct? Because transport isn't just about what's happening in the station. It's also about, are the pavements properly tactile paved according to local regulations? Are there safe crossing points? And so what you end up finding, at least as my role as a transport advisor, and I work for Transport for London here, is you go, well, okay, every week we're going to look at a specific project. We're going to go, okay, is the tactile paving this area right? Is this station which has just opened? Is the signage accessible? Is the lighting according to regulation? Could it be improved past regulation? Because a lot of the times regulation is just the minimum standard. You know, most operators can do so much more because the regulations don't cover much at all, actually. They don't consider different visual impairments, different mobility impairments. You know, it's every city and local council and every local operator typically has their own internal standards as well. So you end up realizing that to fix transport accessibility, you have to go piece by piece, you know, make projects on a microscopic level. But then over time, you take all that knowledge and learning and you try to make bigger business decision changes. So how do we work on improving the general standard? And sometimes, bringing this back to WeWalk, how can a technology and an innovation and a way of thinking that we apply at WeWalk, how can that translate to the actual transport operator? So have you guys got a digital strategy? Does your transport network, does it provide free access to an API that allows other assistive technology manufacturers to better understand and deliver your transport information to the local user? So, you know, you might think of a local bus company. They might have like all the information about their bus arrival times, which can make a huge difference to the visually impaired person's life. But unfortunately, their information is channeled through to their own individual application. So you have to download their application, and it's inaccessible because they're a bus company. They don't have anything to do with, you know, visually impaired application development. That's left up to companies like ourselves, and that's already challenging enough for us. So then how does a company like us come into your data points, and how do we take your data sets and manipulate them? So as you see, it's multifaceted, and it's probably the biggest challenge, I'd say, in terms of visually impaired mobility, which is transport. It's a key derived demand, you know? I would love to have this discussion with you, but it's a huge topic to discuss, so that perhaps it could be an episode too.
Yeah, we can do that. You know, I mean, the thing is, right? When you think about, of course, there is lots of questions to answer, for sure. In terms of, as I said, APIs, so data and how we deliver that data. But, you know, I don't know. For me, like, as we said, the transport accessibility is the most important thing because we're not drivers. You know, we're not going to drive a car for a while. You know, like sometimes as a user, you know, I don't have as much experience as you do in terms of regulations and what's, you know, I mean, I'm asking different questions. I'm asking questions as a user, you know, and sometimes as a user, you don't know what to ask and what questions are the right questions, you know, and that's
no such thing. There's no such thing as the right question. I mean, here's the thing. And this is again a danger, which is you can, as a transport operator entering on transport, or even technology at WeWalk, you know, you can come and give the person a super technical answer. You can say, well, this standard says that on this train station floor, you have to have 300 lux at the gate line. And you're like, okay, someone's researched this, someone's measured the light level. But then you get an actual user coming into the station going well, I can't see anything. Where's the gate line? Is the user asking the wrong question? Absolutely not. I mean, there's no such thing as a wrong question. If the user fundamentally cannot use the environment, it doesn't matter what the standard is, doesn't matter what the technicality is, someone's going to have to go back and rethink about the design. And again, something we do at WeWalk, it's like we think, oh, okay, we've gotten the best navigation system. This was like a few months ago. We've got this right, we've got this right. And you realize, well, actually, maybe there's room for improvement. We have to keep making those improvements and those changes, and we do. And it's a way of thinking that nothing is perfect. Things can always be improved, and that's the way to do it. Like never stopping.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I just, as a geek, I just want some beacons around. I want beacons everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
put everything everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, not well. I just like I'm originally actually from Lithuania, but they have beacons in the buses, and it's very cool because they tell you when the bus arrives. Bus 47. And it's so cool because it solves such a big issue. I could have most accessible system. I just don't know which bus to get into.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That's a cool system. Buses on beacons on buses. That's the way,
Because I was talking with the guy there is a company called Ride Here. And what they do is they make beacons, and they have navigation app as well, which is based on their beacons. And that's how they make it free for their users, because so the company who are using their beacons, they can use their app to navigate indoors. So that's also a good idea and good business model, actually, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's
for sure.
So that's why I'm into those beacons, because I know there is already working implementation. And does UK have beacons in the buses? I can't remember. Probably don't.
So in London, we don't. We do have like TfL's RTI, so real-time information. So Google Maps and even WeWalk, and this is really cool. WeWalk will tell you when the bus is arriving, what bus is arriving.
Yeah, you're probably using Google Maps API for that, I'm assuming, right?
So no, we're using Move It. Which is amazing. Those guys are great.
Yeah, Google Maps is too expensive anyway. I was checking their API, and it's not cheap. That's for those who are developers.
Nothing is cheap, I'll say that. But I mean, it's an amazing data source, right? Like, it's invaluable, really. So it's worth what it is. But yeah, so we've got something called the RTI. And it'll tell you when the bus is arriving based on the bus's position. So instead of the bus communicating with you via beacon, it communicates to a central positioning network, which then feeds to the Move It API, which we then access. It's such a cool system.
Yeah, Move It. It's a really good system because it's available everywhere. They are long enough in this game, so they have lots of data sources. They're
1,500 cities. Huge.
Massive, yeah. And it's good that you have the integration, because I can stand and say, okay, your bus is arriving soon, and whatnot. That's great,
Yeah.
Just the problem with the thing is, if there is like that happens quite a bit. Thank God I have a bit of sight, and it's fine, But what do you do if there are two buses right beside each other? It's a big problem. And I think
something which I don't think that's just one of the ways of life, I guess.
Yeah, but do you think beacons would not solve that problem? If I have a device that can detect my beacon, let's say, I'm talking purely from technical. I'm not talking about now how difficult or easy would that be, because of course it is difficult. There is lots of infrastructure, as you said, and there's lots of things to do before that can happen. You just can't call the guy and say, hey, give me 50,000 beacons. But what I'm saying, what do you think from a technical perspective? Would that be a good solution? If I have a beacon that talks to my device, I can point my device and it vibrates when I'm pointing at the right bus. And it just could go to the right bus, if there is a beacon. Because beacon is a cheap device to do. It's not that expensive,
Yeah, I agree. And again, we're considering the use of beacons in the indoor navigation upcoming feature, which we're working on. We are actually using beacons. Mm-hmm. So it is a great technology, by no doubt. Like, if we were to fit buses with beacons, sure. The only thing is, and I know sort of I bring this back to the bigger picture, but it's consistent implementation of this technology. Consistency is so important. Like, if you have two buses equipped with beacons, and then one bus that doesn't so happen to have a beacon, then you've essentially confused the visually impaired person. And then you also have the liability issues. So will the transport operator want to install beacons based on safety, security regulations, which again, we try to overcome. So we're using the best technology for the upcoming project. So what this means to say is, yes, it's an amazing technology, but just like with any technology you can install, you always have to consider what happens if the system goes wrong. Is there sufficient system integrity? So if the beacon on a bus fails, as a visually impaired person, how will I know that beacon has failed so that I won't miss my bus? Does the beacon provide, again, the right level of information? Does the system continuously work? And then what happens if I travel to a new city or there's a different bus operator? So here in London, there are different bus operators. Yes, they're all under TfL, but each of them have slightly different buses. Some buses are more accessible than others. how do you ensure the local operators also follow that regulation? So whilst it's a great idea, it's always more complicated than it seems in terms of getting things approved and getting things on. So again, we're trying, someone has to do it, is what I'm saying.
I think it needs to be done. I mean, yes, we can talk about the regulations, but as a user perspective is, as a user, I don't really, regulation doesn't bother me, and it shouldn't, because as a user, I want just to have accessible navigation, and I think because the reason I'm talking like this, and I'm really 100% committed to the idea of beacons, is because I know that it works, because we have that system in Lithuania, and it works wonderfully, Plus, as I said, it's not expensive, that's why I wanted to ask your opinion. I know that there are regulations and, all the behind the scenes problems. But in your opinion, would that solve the problem, in terms of if we have all the power and resources? That's what I meant.
I would say, I would say it definitely will be a very crucial piece of the puzzle, undoubtedly. I have no doubt in saying that. Again, big question, can probably dive into it in terms of technicality, but if someone can get it all right, and you can sort things out from a both technical and regulatory perspective, then I have no doubt that it would be a huge step forward for the visually impaired community. Yeah.
See, the one thing I thought of in terms of accessibility is, not far away, probably, we will be able to, the shelves on the shops will have some kind of devices to track what you buy. So I think that would be useful as well, because I have a problem with big shopping malls, right? And I know it's just, we can't do nothing much about it now, but I think if we implement some kind of sensors, in the future, it will be useful, because
people are doing that. People are already doing that.
Because tracking for business might be just good for tracking for visually impaired as well, I think we could benefit from that, because what I say to people is, most important thing for blind and visually impaired individual is access to the data, And for example, I say, okay, people ask me usually, how would you solve reading a menu in a restaurant? And I often say, what? The best thing would be to do is have an app in which there is an accessible menu of that restaurant. So you don't need a piece of paper to read it, And I think that's just the best way to do it, you know what I mean? It's one of, I think, imagine, I just thought of the feature for WeWalk. It's not related to navigation, but imagine if your app is connecting to some helpful APIs, like restaurant APIs, you could just build an app that actually, gives you the restaurant menu based on where you are in accessible format, you know what I mean? Like there are so many places, in America particularly, where they have all those services, Uber Eats, whatnot, So if you have those APIs, you can actually essentially provide an accessible menu to the blind or visually impaired individual.
Yeah, exactly. And if we put that in as a feature, I'll be like, that's a TechVB requested feature right there. But no, I agree in the sense that, yes, why take a fundamentally inaccessible medium like a restaurant menu, try to make that accessible by asking someone to scan a piece of paper, for instance, when you can just access it online, get your voiceover to do it, get your high contrast to translate it. So it's like that innovative way of thinking. Like who knew, during the pandemic, so many restaurant menus went online because people didn't want to handle paper menus. And some people thought, oh, this is a problem now. Paper menus were the easiest thing in the world. Now I have to log into an app. As a visually impaired person, you're like, oh my God, this is what I've been doing for years. I have to log into an application like Google Maps to try to find the restaurant menu. And now all the restaurants are uploading their menus digitally. This has made my life so much easier. It's incredible how, these things somehow become more accessible over time digitally.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about accessibility, for us, the thing we can get, the most accessible medium for us is a digital one, And
Absolutely.
The more we get digital, which we do, automatically we're going to get more accessibility in it,
Yeah, and that's what we do at WeWalk. So people are like, well, what are you doing differently than Google Maps, for instance? You're still giving people walking directions and navigation. And you're like, yeah, we're using the same data sources, but the way we're delivering the information is completely different. It's access to the digital data set and translating it to a way that visually impaired people can access and understand. And that's an art. Like it takes, as I said, the challenges we mentioned, the skill set we mentioned, like it's an effort, but the room for accessibility in the digital field is huge. You can almost make anything accessible digitally, but if I gave you something on a piece of paper, yes, you can do some things like scan it and convert it, but then again, that's a digital process. So the digital realm has a huge potential for accessibility.
What you're saying, I suppose, is it's not only about accessible data per se, but it's also about accessible process. So basically, how you get from A to Z in the most accessible way possible.
Exactly.
So, you can take a photo, but how can you ensure that you're taking the photo in an accessible way? Because it's hard to find the paper, it's hard to align the paper, so you have to kind of think of that about it as well,
Exactly. How does, you can build the best image recognition system that can tell you what's on what ingredients are in your cereal, but if you can't find the cereal box to begin with in the store shelf, then did you really achieve it? So it's how do you merge different digital platforms, and how's the process streamlined enough? Again, and I know I take this back to WeWalk all the time, but it's the best example. It's why we're here, right? Like,
that's what you're working on.
You're jumping between 4 to 5 different applications. Yes, it's a digital system. And yes, we've almost created a problem by creating so many different applications for different services. Well, we've realized the problem, and we've tried to streamline the process by putting the entire digital system under one roof. So the process, I like that word used, the process to actually reaching that data, accessing it, and using it also has to be streamlined and accessible.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, yeah. Well, we had very cool conversation. Before I let you go, is there anything you want to tell our listeners from WeWalk or stuff like that?
All I'd say is thanks for having me on. I hope that this has given our users an insight into the way we design things. So I think it's so important, especially in a community like ours, where trust in technology and trust in the people building it. That's an important thing. So I hope that this has given people insight into the really cool design processes and philosophies we have in the company. I would say just visit our website. That's, we love posting updates, our Instagrams as well. We're a very social company, so we love telling people about our new projects and new features, how to use WeWalk. We love what we do. So check out our website at www.wewalk.io, or just at WeWalk.io on Twitter, Instagrams, and all that. And just catch up with what we're doing, or get in touch with us if you have any other questions. You'll probably end up reaching me or a member of our team through our website help. Like we kind of know about everything that everyone does. So in terms of contact, so please drop us a message and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And thanks for having me. This has been such a great conversation. I'm so glad we touched on WeWalk, transport accessibility, because again, that's what accessibility is. It's not one product or one technology. It's about how all these products and technologies and infrastructure work together. And we need more people like this. We need more people like UV doing stuff like this, and giving people a platform like this. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to solve is definitely the right problem. I think it's really, really important what you're trying to solve, and I like the idea that you decided to integrate software and hardware together in the right way. Because one thing I like about smartphones, I never told maybe in this podcast, is that, it became a GPS device, it became a scanner. You don't have to buy a $2,000 machine now to read your mail. That's just amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Seeing AIs, for example, changed everything.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Technology. It's just it's crazy. I'm actually surprised how good they are, like Soundscape app and stuff like that, which could be probably used in tandem with yours, I'm assuming.
Yeah. We know the people at Microsoft. They're a project partner. Sakit Sheikh, the guy behind Saying AI, one of our advisory board members, go figure. So we're all in the same boat, like everyone helps each other, so we're like, they helped us with our accessibility. We help them, we meet them. It's amazing, that we're all in one team.
Well, that's good to know that you're working together to solve the major issues.
Exactly.
All right. Well, again, thanks for coming. I really enjoyed the conversation. There is lots of technical insights you gave us, and I like your, your thinking behind things. It's not all about hardware. It's also about, it's also about answering really important questions. It's not always I want. It's what I want is really, really needed. I like that insight out of you. It shows that you are in this problem deeply. Because you gave very interesting thoughts regarding some questions I asked, And
Yeah.
I think those point of view, that's what the most important thing, it's one of the more important things is, people like you give a right information that not many people would think about, because if you're not in this game, if you're not designing an app or a service, how could you know where are the problems? How could you know what to do about it, And I think it gave us a little glimpse of what to ask and what to do, and how to think about accessibility,
Yeah, exactly.
All right, then.
Well, can't say anything, but thank you very much. Keep it up. Keep up this amazing podcast and all the stuff you write on the website. And great to be here.
So there we go. That's a podcast episode. Amazing conversation, wasn't it? I think it was. So I hope you enjoyed it, because I did. So, of course, if you want to see more episodes or find out more about what we do, you can do it two ways. One, go to techvb.net, and also you can follow us on social media by searching for TechVB Society. And of course, you can find our podcasts wherever you find your podcasts. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.